Hello and welcome back to Polytoots. Today we're going to be looking at doing tiled sculpting for textures. And I know there's a fair few tutorials on this already, but I think at least, there's some sort of hints and tips that I'm aware of that I haven't seen, so I'm happy to sort of just share them. And at first we're going to kind of cover some issues that I've encountered, things to kind of avoid to make your life a bit easier. So we'll start initially with the surface sculpting mode. And there are these two options here for the tiled boxes. We'll choose the 3x3, and so then we'll only have to work on the center, and everything else will kind of be tiled around that. It does have this pop-up window that kind of explains what to do when you're done. Most importantly, just the file export depth along Y. So this is essentially, it's a 3x3 grid, and this centerpiece here is the one that all the others will instance. I mean, they'll all instance each other, but one of them has to be in the middle. And it's pretty good for really basic stuff. Like if you were to just do some random things, you can see it sort of instance across on the others. And what some of the tutorials don't really explain is that you can't paint across the mesh. So if I do that, you see it just because we're only able to affect this one center. So let me bring that back. So yeah, you can't do that, and there's no real way around that in terms of sculpting. Unfortunately, 3D Coach is just like the way that this is built. It just cannot do that. So if you need to sort of paint like some sort of like wavy, sandy kind of a thing or whatever, then well, you can't basically. But what this is good for is, I don't know, like everything else, like rocks and bricks, slates and tiles. But a lot of that requires accuracy. And most of the tutorials that I've seen, they don't really cover how to do things particularly accurate, as in lining things up on a grid to make sure that everything kind of fits and tiles nicely. There's always some weird sort of scaling happening at the end where things haven't quite worked out, and so they're having to make some adjustments. But so a lot of this video will kind of cover how to sort of avoid those mistakes, and also to point out a glaringly obvious mistake that 3D Coat seem to have made. The first being this centerpiece, for example. It's a box that's supposed to be sort of 100 along one axis and 100 along another, and we know this because if we were to export the depth along the Y, we get this this square sort of patch, and you can already tell if I zoom in a bit here, the boundaries of the square that's provided with this sort of scene, it actually goes beyond 100 to 100, which is a strange decision. I don't know why they've done this, but it's a bit kind of confusing. To give you an example of how this might mess up everything you're doing, or like if you've ever done a tiled thing and you're trying to work things out correctly and then somehow things are still ending up not quite right, then this will probably explain why. So if I were to just get the cutoff here, and I'll just cut off as thin as a piece as I can, so something like this, and now I'll enable all of the others. So you can see that we're getting this overlap. So that's just it's a strange thing. But yeah, I mean, I won't dwell on this too much. If anything, this is all kind of redundant because you don't need to use their system. You can kind of just, if you want, just cut off everything. And if you did want to have like a box in place, you just create your own with a primitive, and you'd make it specifically 100 by 100, and then just add that in. You are going to get these, it's quite hard to see with this, let's put on this other one. So yeah, you are going to get these sort of edge lines here, which is maybe why the developers of 3D Coat chose to try and like hide those by making your box a bit larger. But in my opinion, that's a very stupid thing to do, because it makes people think that the extents of their tiling range are actually larger than what they should be. So yeah, something to keep in mind. So now that we've done that, let's just actually get rid of this. Oh, I'm in the draw mode, so let's go back to cutoff. Show you what I would do, and let's actually just let's make a new layer, and we'll just, at the moment I'll just call this box. This is just for show, It's just a temporary thing because we're going to set up our own grid, but I want to make sure that it's actually 100 by 100. So we already have this that's already set to 100 by 100. Okay, so we're going to make our own grid, and we know that it has to come to sort of these lines to make, like, if it's not entirely obvious, if I just duplicate this and say put that back to 0 and then minus 100. So if it's within this area here, then I know it's 100 by 100 grid. So we're going to go up to view, and we will go to grid density, and we'll set it to custom, and then customize grid, and we'll just change some things around here. And if this menu isn't quite working the same for you, like if you're entering information, like if I have to do 20, and then if your grid isn't updating, it happens to me every now and again as well, but if you just move the viewport a bit, then the grid will update. But fortunately the gods are smiling on me right now, so this is actually working in real time, which, yeah, it doesn't always do. So okay, so now I can get rid of my two layers, because again they were just there for sort of reference. And so now we have our own grid that we know is definitely 100 by 100. And not only that, but we can change this to have subdivisions and whatnot. So if you were doing bricks or tiles or slates or something that had to actually sort of start and end in like very accurate positions, instead of just kind of eyeballing everything and scaling it at the end, then you would always want to be working with a grid anyway. So what you can actually do is snap to 3D grid. And so now let's say if I were to get the I'm looking for the blob tool, but it doesn't exist in surface mode, so we're going to hop back to voxels, and I'll give this just a tiny bit more resolution. That's an optional step. You can change the resolution afterwards. So yeah, the blob tool, just to make things easier. And so if I were to just click here, it's going to snap here and there and there. Okay, pretty cool. So if I was doing tiles or bricks or anything, I would want to just use the blob tool, and so I would just come along and I do things like this, happy days, or swap it to, say, so bricks or something. So, you know, 2 by 2 by 2. You always know that it will be the same. So if you were to duplicate this and offset it a bit, it will always kind of tile along one edge. But the problem with the blob tool is this, in that it seems to just pick a random point in Y space to place these things down, and I don't know why. Like it's a shame, because this tool would prove pretty handy for doing stuff, and we will still use it, but we're only going to use it to make one thing, and then we'll just duplicate that one thing. So yeah, it seems like another bug to me, in that not everything is being created on the same Y plane, even though we were in orthographic and looking at it from the top. So yeah, a bit strange. So anyway, let's just clear all of this, and let's just go with, I mean, because this is just to kind of show you the actual sort of pipeline. So we will go with the blob tool, and let's go back onto a less ugly shader, and we'll do I don't know, like wood planks or something. So when you put down your first piece, that's kind of where you want to decide, is it thick enough? Does it have enough resolution? And for me, no, for both. And you kind of want to get these things right now rather than having to change them all later. So let's just undo that. And for the blob tool, if we want to increase the thickness of it, we just need to increase the radius. So now if I were to put down this, we have more depth, which, not to be confused with the depth, again, it's, you know, it's a bit strange. So the other thing is we just want to res plus this, so we have a bit more detail, because those edges are mean, it's still looking, we can probably go up one more, I think, and that should be fine. So we'll do that again. Yeah, that's fine. So, okay, let's do something like wood planks or whatever. So rather than putting each one in the same layer, what we will instead do is we'll just create a new layer here, and it's just okay, I mean, I'll do a basic sort of, yeah, this should be fine for now. And oh, of course, because this is a new layer, it doesn't have our subdivisions, so it's res plus again. So we'll do that, and then you can either duplicate this layer now and then just move it, and obviously when you move things with the snap to 3D grid, it will snap to the 3D grid. And if you're doing this, I recommend disabling this pick by click option, because when that's on, sometimes depending on sort of how many objects you have, if I was trying to move this object to the left, I might accidentally select this other layer, which gets really annoying really fast. So yeah, I tend to disable that, and I just use the H key if I want to select something else. So H on that, or you can just come down here to, you know, your regular layers, and we'll just duplicate this again, which I have set mine to a hotkey, Control J, I think, the same as Photoshop, but you can assign a hotkey down here. Wait, let's go back a bit. We don't want to be duplicating, we want to be cloning with an instance. That's my bad. So what we'll actually do is right click on this layer and go to clone and clone instance, and then move it like that. And if you want to make this a bit quicker, you can give this a shortcut key. So let's just do mine, and I'll just set it to I don't know, Control I. Maybe something else uses that, maybe it doesn't. So now if I just Control I can do this. So Control I again. Actually, one little tip I like to kind of do is when I reach a point where, like for example, two of these pieces equals like a whole sort of tile, which means we are going to come into instances where if we're trying to make it a bit random, we'll still end up with the same. So you see these two pieces at the top and these two pieces here. What I tend to do is whenever I encounter that, to kind of help break up the illusion of tiling, is I'll make sure that the pieces I do underneath are not the same as the pieces here, because essentially this is your unique texture and the rest of it will tile. So the less you can do within this unique texture to reduce the tiling, the better. And to a certain extent, trying to sort of trick the user into sort of thinking they see a tile, but then they realize that it isn't a tile, can actually be kind of pretty beneficial. And what I mean by that is, so if we were to, now it's a very sort of, I don't know, like an almost subconscious thing, in that if someone were to run past this wall in a game, not really paying attention to it, maybe they are, or a floor, it could be a floor, haven't decided, they could see where this line and this line here is the same, and they might think that's where the tiling is, but then you'd immediately prove that wrong, because on the row underneath you have the gap here and you have the other one up here. So it's probably not a big deal, but it's something that I like to kind of keep in mind, in that if you are ending up with sort of the same repetitive pattern, just make sure that it doesn't then sort of, you know, completely follow it in order. So we're not going to completely follow this arrangement and then this arrangement and then this arrangement. So yeah, sorry, something to keep in mind. I'll go back to speeding up the video now. Okay, so with the last piece in place, what you can actually do is you can either sort of instance all this stuff now to see kind of how it looks. So if you were to just select all of these layers, and by the way, if you can't select all of the layers, then you're probably using an older version of 3D Coat. This is a pretty new feature, I think, to be able to select multi. But either way, now we'll go to clone, and choose the instance to parent instances, and this is basically going to just throw all of those other layers into the original instance layers. So you're going to end up with a lot of layers. So what I like to do is I'll do it once just to kind of see how it looks, and that's completely fine. You know, it's pretty simple. And then I won't do it again, and something very strange is happening here. Doing the Control Z after instancing everything, it also undid my last move here. So another bug, brilliant. So yeah, from here, what you can do is basically just work on each piece individually. So, you know, you can hide all of the others, and bearing in mind we are dealing with instances, so we're not going to do any unique stuff per se. Let's just, as an example, grab like the carve tool, or not. That's pretty horrible. Maybe we'll swap over to surface mode, and we'll use the chisel instead, because maybe this won't break. Oh, it's also worth noting, my snap to 3D grid is still on, so getting some pretty weird results here. So okay, so turn that off, and now I have my fluid movement back. And yeah, so if I were to just keep doing some stuff here, this is now going to be mirrored in all of these. So again, for this stage, you want to sort of keep things pretty minimal, like as a kind of base shape. Like for me, the original sort of hardness of the edge is kind of what I want to get rid of. So I'll give all of them the same treatment, and you could, of course, just do this on one brick and then duplicate that brick at the start. It results in the same thing, the exact same thing, but the only difference, of course, is if you decide to change your mind and that you do want to change something else on all of them, you're then going to have to go back and do it through all of them. So you might as well start with instances just to make your life a little bit easier. So yeah, so now we very quickly just sort of turned them all into, you know, I would say a little bit more kind of interesting. One other thing to keep in mind is, for me, I don't know if there is a way, let's say if I right click a layer, I don't know if there is a way to make these unique as they are. So basically now, let's get something a little bit more obvious. As they are now, everything that I do will be instanced across all of them. So what I tend to do is, like, if I'm happy with the sort of overall pass that I've done and I want to start making things unique, I will actually just duplicate and then delete the original. So yeah, it's not super user friendly, but now, so this piece, if I were to start, if I were to actually select it and use a tool, oh, where did that go? There we go, Rapid 2. Now if I were to start doing stuff with this one, it's no longer being copied across the rest. So yeah, I don't know if there is a way. If someone is aware of a way, then let me know. But yeah, for me, I would just select whichever one I wanted to make unique, duplicate it, and then remove the original. So yeah, so what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to go through sort of all of these quickly, and then we'll move on to baking these textures out. And then I'll show you another sort of quick tip as to how you can actually get like a lot more variance out of your textures. Okay, so let's just assume that you have gone through this and set it up however you want, and then we'll just do that same thing we did before. So we'll select all the layers and clone to instance, to parent instance. So now we have all of them, and what we will do now is bake this out, and then we'll do some little sort of trickery to it in Photoshop before we bring it in for actual painting. And I mean, for me, because I'm not doing the painting here, like you could if you wanted, let me just hide all of these. You could, if you wanted, come over to the paint room and, you know, make a layer and just start texturing it here. Obviously I still have instance layers, so you'd have to not have that. So yeah, you could just start texturing, and then you could do the bake, and you could bake out all of your maps, and then you could just call it a day. But for me, I find whenever I do these sort of tiling sculpts in 3D Coat, it gets pretty sort of resource heavy really quickly. And so even this, like as a base, like if we're saying this is the sort of the area of our unique texture, it's not a big area. Like if you were to put just this texture in a game and have it tile, people will notice it tiling quite well. Like you'd want sort of a lot more bricks, but of course a lot more bricks is a lot more polygons, a lot more things to texture. It's you know, again, pretty sort of resource heavy. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go to File. Well, I'm not. I'm going to make sure everything is enabled, because it will essentially project an image from the front. So we want to make sure that we're seeing everything, because if I had all these layers, other layers hidden, then we'd get gaps, obviously. So yeah, export depth along Y, and I tend to bake pretty high, not as high as I would ever want to use it. Like for example, this particular texture, just like a brick wall, you know, I'm thinking like 2K tops. Obviously it depends entirely on the context of what it's used for. If you've got some AAA first-person shooter game, then like if it's a wall that someone's going to get up and close to, then yeah, I mean obviously you want stupid high resolution. So as I was saying before, because we haven't pre-painted this, we really have no need for the color or the gloss or the roughness, you know, anything. So we just want the normal map, and I'll do it at 8K, and the patch size again like 100, because we know that this size of our initial area is 100. PNG is fine, and so yeah, we'll just save this out, and then we'll just call it anything. I don't know, brick normals. The file type here, this not to be confused with the window that we just saw previously, where you specify the extension of your normal map or your color map or whatever else is you're exporting. You can set those on that actual window. This EXR refers to the height map that 3D Coat will automatically bake out. So yeah, it's a bit confusing because we're not about to save our normal map as an EXR. So yeah, so yeah, we'll save that out, and then what we'll do is, well, once it saves and hopefully it doesn't crash, we will bring this back into 3D Coat, into the paint room. Okay, so after it's done, we're going to bring it into Photoshop, and this might take a while. I probably shouldn't have rendered that out at 8K. That was a bit overkill, but the reason that I tend to bake these out crazy high is there's no anti-aliasing when it comes to the baking of these normal maps from 3D Coat. And for this, it's not really that obvious, but essentially you do end up with these very blocky artifacts almost that will sort of translate into your game. And so this isn't necessarily the best practice what I'm about to do, but you know, it works. So we're going to bring this down by half, so it's going to be a 4096, not 406, 4096, and then I'm even going to bring it down again, so 2048. Nice. Okay, and so the little sort of cheat, or the trick is, no, we won't crop. Before we bring this into 3D Coat to paint, we're actually going to tile it ourselves, basically. And you might think that this is a very strange thing to do, in that we've got essentially the same image tiled, you know, an extra sort of 3 times. So why bother? Like, why not just have the one tile? And the reason, of course, is because although our initial sort of normal map will stay the same and it will tile, in 3D Coat we can add whatever it is we want. Like if you wanted to add some extra detail over on this one, but to have it not mirrored on the exact same one that would be in this space over here, then it makes sense. So essentially you're kind of you're increasing the range of your tile, but it does mean that you are going to have to kind of do some extra stuff, because if you just have everything as the same color and the same normals, then yeah, there's absolutely no point in duplicating this. So yeah, so now we're back up to a 4K, which is pretty crazy, but No, okay, we're going to bring it down to 2K, so 2048. And so we're just going to save this out, and then this is the one we will bring into 3D Coat. Okay, so back in 3D Coat, we can just start a new thing, and we will paint a UV matte mesh. So we'll go with, we'll just go with the tile, and 2K is fine. Don't think we need to change anything. Let's come into perspective, and let's hide our grid. And so now all we have to do is put on our normal map. And it was this one. You will get these options pop up. Essentially, if you want it to work, like if you've exported it from 3D Coat and you're trying to bring it back into 3D Coat, then leave this as it is. Okay, so there we go. Yeah, I mean, from here, the tutorial's pretty much over. This isn't, you know, a texturing one. Obviously, you would just do whatever it is you want to do. I don't know why I chose that color, but that's the way it is. And I'm not on a color. So yeah, so again, to kind of reiterate the point of extending the tile, so that it basically tiles before you even put it in, is that ordinarily, if I were to just paint this brick that color, it would paint every other brick. It would paint this brick as well. But because we've introduced some extra tiling ourselves, it basically has allowed us to have a bit more room with certain things. And so, you know, you can sort of come in and try to sort of do your own little normal map details, or, you know, a difference in sort of spec or color or whatever, and it's not going to be as obvious. The base normal map, like where you actually have these spaces between the bricks, that will stay the same. That can't really be changed. I mean, you could, in theory, kind of get your normal map and try to sort of smooth these into one. And then, I mean, this is a terrible example. And then come down and try to create your own gap. Which, you know, power to you. You can if you want. But, oh, that's not good. Well, that's the end of the tutorial anyway. So, I don't think I had anything else left to teach. So yeah, I hope that makes sense. If you have any questions or comments, if I went through anything too fast, let me know. 3D Coat's about to crash now, so I'll see you in the next one. Oh god, I don't even have control over my mouse. I can use tab, I guess. Save work. I don't want to save my work. Cancel. If I press cancel, does that cancel it crashing? No. Nice.